Fondation Jean-Jaurès.
Penser pour agir.
The Russian war in Ukraine is not receding. It has already claimed a heavy toll of human lives, caused a massive exodus, and it continues to affect all European countries. To discuss its implications in the Western Balkans and for the EU, the Fondation Jean-Jaurès, Balkan Focus and their partners are giving the floor to key personalities from the region. My name is Florent Marciacq. I'm co-director of the Observatory des Balkans at the Fondation Jean-Jaurès. And today I'm glad to receive Mrs. Radmila Šekerinska, who has been acting Prime Minister of North Macedonia, Deputy Prime Minister for European Affairs, and Minister of Defense of North Macedonia. Thank you for joining, Mrs. Šekerinska.
Thank you very much, Florent.
So what are, according to you, the main implications of this war for your country, North Macedonia?
What we have seen immediately after the beginning of the atrocities and the serious Russian aggression to Ukraine was a very strong political, practically, influence. And political implications were visible even practically from the first days of the aggression. What happened was that practically the aggression put a lot of pressure on political parties, political individuals, and the media to follow the events with the right approach, having in mind the information. But what we have seen is really a significant increase, furthermore, of fake news and of Russian influences. And this has polarized the political atmosphere in the country furthermore. I don't think that it has to do with Russia or Ukraine and the war. It is practically a result of the fact that the population or the public in North Macedonia has already been very disappointed in the lack of progress on the EU enlargement. And they have seen this as a proof that, if I can be very informal, the West does not deliver on its commitments, and that these kinds of double standards have been the reason why we have been lagging behind. And this has been used by some populist politicians, but also especially by fake news outlets. And I see this as the first influence of the war. Additionally, I think it has opened the region to vulnerabilities from both fake news and malign influences from the East, from Russia. We are definitely seeing also economic consequences in terms of rising energy prices and especially rising prices of all main commodities. But I think that the first reaction was actually the political implications. What we have seen suddenly is a very big increase in the demand of populist strong leaders. And this is the first time that we have actually seen such a dramatic influence in North Macedonia. We were blessed and proud of our very strong pro-democratic, pro-Western population. We have always had support for NATO and EU membership above 80 or 90%. For the first time, people have started doubting the process. And as I say, this is not directly linked to the war in Ukraine. It has been a consequence, or the war was a bit of speeding up of this declining faith that the EU enlargement will deliver.
Yes, you mentioned this disappointment of the population in North Macedonia, the fact that the perception that the EU has not delivered. The Council granted candidate status to North Macedonia. I think it was even under your term as Deputy Prime Minister for European Affairs in 2005. The Commission has repeatedly been recommending the opening of accession negotiations since then, and still your country is not moving. It's been blocked by member states, and now it's clear that the EU, so nowhere in the Western Balkans is the EU undermining its own credibility somehow, as it is with North Macedonia. Yet these shifts in the East with Ukraine, with the idea that we need a little bit more strategic thinking, more action, that time matters. These shifts, do you think that they will cause some kind of shift or some affect the enlargement policy in some way? there has been a reform already 2 years ago, spearheaded by France. But do you expect a bigger revision of the strategy towards the Western Balkans of the EU in enlargement matters?
I hope so, but I'm still not seeing very clear indications for this. I don't believe that the war, the aggression of Russia in Ukraine, is a reason to reconsider enlargement strategy. I think it's just the proof that it was supposed to be strengthened and in a way reconfirmed before the war. It was just a proof that, you know, enlargement policy has a security implication as well. And it would have been much better if the enlargement strategy and the enlargement delivery was more active and more visible. I think that the Western Balkans would have been better protected from the aftermath of the crisis or the war in Ukraine. What we see now, of course, is a big decline in the influence of the European Union. I believe that even before the war, the European Union was actually not fully aware of how big its leverage is in North Macedonia, especially, I mean, if you consider the period until 2021. It was not seizing all the leverage sometimes. But now I think the game has changed. What we see now is a European Union that is more timid, less vocal, even about, you know, the issues that are very important, because EU is now aware that the delivery is lagging behind. And this is why we have actually entered a very negative vicious circle where you see less engaged European Union, less vocal European Union, and less open to advise public and institutions. And this is the case throughout the region. I think that when North Macedonia made this bold move to sign the Prespa agreement, this is practically the only successful agreement lately. And it was done with a very courageous move by both the governments in North Macedonia and Greece. I don't think that the European Union seized the potential of the Prespa agreement to show it to all the countries in the Western Balkans, but also in the East Europe, that compromises pay off, that bold leadership can actually mean that you solve the old problems, even historical, symbolical issues, and still manage even to win elections, because this is what we did. We solved the problem. We were severely criticized by nationalists, but then we won the elections. And instead of doing this, I think that this procrastination in the EU enlargement was a wasted opportunity. And many people, especially nationalists and populists in the Balkans, were using this example. Look at North Macedonia. They have done everything humanely possible. They have even made a compromise on their name, and still the EU did not move, because the problems with Bulgaria are visible and have been the reason for yet another delay in the last year and a half. But there was a window of opportunity immediately after Prespa, which was unfortunately not seized. So I do hope that the war in Ukraine will make everyone within the European Union aware that, especially when it comes to strategic autonomy, this has to be exercised at the front step of the European Union.
You mentioned this decline of the influence of the EU. There are opinion surveys, so for North Macedonia, showing how dramatic it has been. 2019, 43% of the North Macedonians believed the EU is the main ally of the country. In 2021, only 13% believe it. It's lower percentage than the US, and it's not very far from Russia, 11%. So we see this erosion, this fall of this influence of the EU on a country which is very much committed to European integration. An additional question, because you said, of course, it raised the question that compromise does not pay off, and that decline of influence is showing that. How do you see the urgency with other countries around where Russia has some kind of leverage or some kind of entry points on the stability of the region? I'm thinking about Serbia, I'm thinking about Republika Srpska. Do you see a major systemic risk for the region of spreading instability?
I think the risk is systemic. It's throughout the region. And basically, it is the strategy of using vulnerabilities wherever they are. You can clearly see the vulnerabilities in Bosnia. You can clearly see that the negotiations between Belgrade and Pristina are stuck. And I really think that North Macedonia's accession was the case study also for Russia. And they don't need additional arguments to influence the publics in the states in the region. And I think that we have maybe underestimated the possibility that Russia might be using their leverage and their influence in Bulgaria to actually make it very difficult, even for politicians who are more open to warming up with North Macedonia. I have seen also the polls from Bulgaria some time ago done by the European Council for Foreign Relations, and I've used them in some of my meetings to warn Europeans that Bulgaria is the first ranking country, the highest ranking country in European Union when it comes to seeing Russia as an ally or partner. And these kinds of influences, even when they're not politically very visible, mean that they have influence in the media, in businesses, in political parties. And we have seen them operating previously in Greece during the Prespa agreement negotiations, now in Bulgaria. I think that everyone has underestimated this. And it was a very simple and cheap operation, probably for the Russians. And now it works for them throughout the region. So I really think that a breakthrough on EU's behalf is necessary. As someone who has been following opinion polls for 20 years, I'm shocked at this change of EU leverage. I'm shocked, worried. But I also believe that if it's amended, if there is a reaction on behalf of the EU and ourselves, then it can be transient. It can be a hiccup, really, not something to stay. But we need a wake-up call. I think the European Union needs to reconsider not the enlargement strategy, but the enlargement activities. And we need something now rather than later. In this respect, I would support offering the European perspectives to both Ukraine and the other countries interested, like Georgia and Moldova. As you could see from North Macedonia's example, 17 years a candidate country doesn't mean that accession is done. So EU can have a process that will give time for the countries to adjust and reform. But a political signal is important, because when people lose hope, then politicians lose their leverage and citizens lose their patience. And I think this is the worst case scenario that we have seen both in the Balkans and in the East.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mrs. Šekerinska. Thank you. So we need a wake-up call. We need signals, actions now. So that's what I'm taking beyond all these insights you've been sharing today. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you very much, Florent, for the interest. Bye.
Fondation Jean-Jaurès. Penser pour agir.